Hey everyone, welcome to the investor.bet NRL round 23 betting preview. In this video, I'm going to go through all the games coming up this weekend, go through who I think is going to win and why, and what I'm considering betting on in each of these matches. And we're also going to look at the odds for each game, what the odds were in their previous meetings, who's been winning, covering the spread, what the lines were, what the total points line was, have their games been going over or under, and any of the other betting trends for these matches, because that information is so important when you're looking at the odds to determine whether you think they're correct or incorrect or where the potential value is. Before we get into this weekend's games, though, I just want to quickly touch on what happened last weekend. So in round 22, 5 of the 8 games went under the total points line. It's pretty easy to see the ones that went over. Tigers, Cowboys, well and truly. Then Dolphins, Roosters went over, and then the Titans, Broncos, Titans going over the total line pretty much almost on their own in that matchup. Overall this season, the under still has the better record. And then from a sides perspective, the away teams covered 5 of the 8 games. And then also underdogs covered 6 of the 8 games. Only 2 favorites who covered were the Sharks against the Rabbitohs and the Cowboys against the West Tigers. The underdogs in every other game covered the spread. That means overall now this season, the underdogs record sits at 93-71. And also last weekend, 3 underdogs won outright. Those sides were the Eels, winning at around the $5 mark against the Warriors, the Titans beating the Broncos, and then probably the biggest upset of the round, the Dragons beating the Melbourne Storm in Melbourne at around the $6 mark. Now, looking ahead to this weekend, there's only 5 rounds left in the season. A couple of interesting games coming up, and we're going to go and run through each one of them, and I'm going to break down how I'm analyzing each specific game. So firstly, Thursday night, the Rabbitohs take on the Storm. Definitely not a good situation here for the Rabbitohs. Storm come into this game, big favorites, minus 15.5. Total at 48.5. The Rabbitohs had a good patch during the mid part of the season where they won 5 straight. Since then, they've only won 1 of their past 4, and that win was against the West Tigers. So hardly coming into this in good form. And last week against the Sharks, they were pretty flat, only managed 6 points. You definitely see the difference not having Latrell Mitchell in that team does to them. Melbourne are a side that rarely ever lose back-to-back games, and obviously everyone knows they lost to the Dragons last week. Expect they're going to come out and be a lot better this weekend. And against the Rabbitohs side, who currently overall in the season concede almost 28 points a game, going against the Storm, who are the number 2 attacking side, I think the Storm get their attack back on track. Minus 15.5, that line I feel like is pretty much spot on. I don't think there's a ton of value in taking the line. I think the better way of playing this game is looking at the try scorers for the Storm. I think that's where you're going to find that little bit of extra value. I think the Storm on the money line at around that, I think it's $1.18 to $1.20 mark currently. Is also good for multi-site. I really can't see them losing this game. I will be covering the try scorers in a secondary video coming out later this week. So definitely make sure you subscribe, have your notifications on so you don't miss that as soon as it's posted. It's going to be out on Thursday morning. Then looking at the trends for this game just quickly so we can analyze, what has happened previously. They last met in round 8 this season in Melbourne and the Storm won 54-20. They were 12.5 point favorites, so $1.23. Now the Rabbitohs did go on a bit of a run since that game, but kind of have fallen back into a similar trap. Probably not as bad as they were earlier in the season, but still definitely struggling. And then looking at the trends, the Storm have covered 7 of the past 10 versus the Rabbitohs, and they've won 9 of the past 11. 4 of the past 5 head-to-head have gone under. So yeah, looking at this game, expect Storm to win and win this comfortably. It's definitely a bounce-back situation for them. The early game on Friday night, Titans at home to the Sharks. Gold Coast coming off a big win last week against the Broncos. Favorites for this game, $1.64 minus 3.5. Sharks coming off a win against the Rabbitohs. Slight outsiders here, $2.27. Total at 50.5. This is a very interesting game. Both sides, it's an important game for them to win. Titans still have a slim hope of making the finals, but will probably need to win every game in order to make it. Sharks kind of clinging onto a spot in the top four. Another side definitely need the win. Sharks have a really good record in this matchup. They only met back in round 18 and the Titans won that game, but prior to that, Cronulla won 8 games in a row against Gold Coast. It was a 4-point win down in Sydney in round 18. Sharks have also covered 7 of the past 9 versus Gold Coast. So they do have a really, really good record in this matchup. However, this weekend they are without their 2 starting halves. So Braden Trindle now out this week with a hamstring issue, and Nico Hines already out. So makes things very difficult without your 2 key playmakers. Atkinson's done well filling in this season, so they don't lose much there. And then Blake Brayley, who generally plays dummy half for the Sharks, comes into the halves for this weekend's games. And interestingly, Cam Kinnis goes to dummy half. So like bit of weird combinations for Cronulla. However, I think they can give themselves a chance of winning this game on the back of the defense. Gold Coast, sometimes when teams win, like what's technically an emotional game like they did last week against like a local rival, they can have a little bit of a letdown performance the following week, and they are definitely vulnerable of doing that here. And the Sharks overall are a good side, and defensively, they're the number 3 ranked defensive side in the league. Titans ranked 13th. So just that in itself gives the Sharks a chance. So how I'm looking at playing this game is looking at the under 50.5. This matchup for the past 5 head-to-head have gone under, and this is the highest total we've seen in the past 4 games. And then also for this game, if I can get the Sharks plus 4.5, if I'll just kind of monitor the market. I think money's going to come for the Titans with the lineups now out for the Sharks, that we could potentially get plus 6.5 here for Cronulla. And if we can get that number, then I feel like that will be the bet in this game. So they're kind of the 2 ways that I'm looking at playing it. But definitely for Sharks to win, it's going to have to be defense orientated. And I still think they can find some points against this Titans defense. So that's how I'm looking at playing that game. Then the later game on Friday night, Parramatta coming off a win last week. Not big outsiders again here. They beat the Warriors, now coming back to Australia. So they had a road trip to New Zealand, not really an ideal situation. The Eels haven't won back-to-back games all season and don't find really a tougher test than playing Penrith. So Penrith $1.14, 16.5-point favorites. Penrith should be winning this game. They're back fairly close to full strength. Now in a battle with the Melbourne Storm. After Melbourne losing last week, now it's going to be a real battle between the 2 sides. Penrith currently have the better for and against of the 2 sides. And both those teams will fight out for the minor premiership. Penrith will win this game and likely win it very, very comfortably. Parramatta coming off that win, kind of similar situation that I spoke about with the Titans. Potential letdown spot against like good opposition, and yeah, Penrith will win comfortably. However, the Eels do have a good record in this matchup. They have won 2 of the past 3. Penrith won early this season back in round 2 as 7.5-point favorites, so quite a big line in comparison to that. Definitely the way I'm looking at playing this game. I'm not going to really touch that minus 16.5 because overall this season, Penrith haven't been winning games by big margins. However, I think there's going to be a lot of value and likely winning bets playing some try scorers with the Panthers, as the Eels' edge defenses are really, really bad, and Penrith are a good side to take advantage of that. So we'll be covering those in the try scorers, but I think Penrith win. You can obviously multi them up, but there's not a great deal of value in, $1.14. Once you get under that $1.20 mark, there's really, you don't have much to work with. From a total perspective, this matchup has been an over with 5 of the past 7 head-to-head going over. However, we have a 48.5-point line compared to 35.5 last time they met, and the other previous meetings in the high 30s as well. We saw a 43.5 late in second last round last season. Generally, not much. This is significantly a higher total, so I'm just going to stay away from that number. On to the Saturday games. Canberra at home to the Manly Seagulls. Manly come into this game off the bye, and This matchup has been fairly even over previous seasons. They've split the past 4 meetings, 2 wins apiece, and the Raiders have covered 4 of the past 6 versus Manly. Coming into this game, the Seagulls have won 3 of the past 4. They nearly got over the Roosters before their bye, lost that game by 4 points, and the Raiders lost by 4 points to the Bulldogs last week, but won their 2 games prior. However, beating New Zealand and the Rabbitohs, hardly good form. I really like Manly in this matchup. I think they win and win comfortably. I'm definitely keen on that -3.5. When they met earlier this season back in round 9, Manly were at home. They were 10.5-point favorites for that game and did lose the game. So firstly, they're not going to take the Raiders lightly in this matchup. And then secondly to that, Manly are arguably playing in better form right now than they were back in round 9. Like they were winning games, but they weren't being as dominant as they have been in recent times. And then Canberra is technically probably, I'd say, playing worse than what they were playing earlier on in the season. So for those reasons, definitely like the Seagulls to win and cover the spread. The total at 48.5 is 4 points higher than their past 2 meetings, which both went over that number. And like I can see why they've increased the number and pushed it up towards that 50 mark. I have the number set at 46. So I do think it's potentially a couple of points high, but we know the Seagulls are a side that can definitely rack up a score and rack it up quickly. When you look at the matchups, it's very hard to, like, I think the line is just definitely the way to play in this game. Also, if we get close to that $1.70 mark for the Seagulls, then I'd almost probably prefer taking that as well compared to $1.90 and laying 3.5 points. But Manly are the number 4 attack going against the 15th ranked attack for the Raiders, and Manly are the number 6 defense going up to the 11th defense for the Raiders. So they have the edge on both sides of the ball, just need to put it together, and I think they win. They did win their last trip out to Canberra as well, winning 42-14. So the venue obviously shouldn't be that much of an issue either. Then we have the Cowboys versus Broncos. Cowboys, big favorites here, -6.5, $1.45. Even though the Broncos have won the past 3 and covered 8 of the past 11 against the Cowboys. This is an interesting game. I think Cowboys win the game. Broncos just really, really out of form at the moment. And like now they're out of the finals race. Potentially that might take a little bit of pressure off. They might play a little bit better. But they've now lost 8 of their past 9 games, with the only win against Newcastle during that time. So yeah, I think Cowboys win. Potentially how I'm looking at playing this game is taking Cowboys to win the game on the money line, so around that $1.45 mark, and then looking at playing it over because the past 6 between these two sides have gone over. Both sides consistently involved in high scoring games week after week. And with the total at 50.5, if we take the Cowboys on the money line, we can buy the total down to 46.5 or in that range. We could even bring that total down to 46.5 as well, 44.5 for around that $2 odds mark. That's probably the way I'm going to be playing it. Also made us play the over 50.5 in general, as I do think it's going to be a high scoring game. The only issue I have is just that we're having to take a much higher number than previous meetings, as this number's been definitely increase massively. But I think, yeah, Cowboys to win, and we'll buy down the over a bit and play those together, expecting that's going to be how this game plays out. Then we have the Dragons versus Bulldogs. Another interesting game. Dragons coming off a win against the Melbourne Storm. Bulldogs coming off a 4-point win against the Canberra Raiders. I like the Bulldogs to win this game. I think they're clearly the better side. They've won and covered 3 of the past 4 against the Dragons, and they did win earlier this season, 44-12. So do find it a little bit difficult to justify why they're only -3.5. Very similar to the Manly Seagulls against the Raiders. I feel like this game kind of fits the same criteria. Home underdogs this season have been very, very profitable, which is probably like the only thing that makes me a touch nervous with both of these plays. But do like the Bulldogs to be winning and covering that -3.5. From a total perspective, at 48.5. This is a fairly high number for a Bulldogs game. Spoken many times, Bulldogs are the number 2 defense. Teams find it very difficult to score against them. And for this game, I'm just going to stay away. I'd probably lean slightly towards the under. The Dragons are very up and down side. Like they can play well and then just play really badly. And for those reasons, that's why I definitely like the Bulldogs in this matchup. They are in really good form. And on the back of their defense, like when we look at these sides, the Bulldogs are the number 2 defense, Dragons number 14, Bulldogs number 10 attack, Dragons ranked 13. So the edge is in their favor. Both sides, they have a good record and did dominate this matchup earlier this season. Then we have the Dolphins versus Warriors. All 3 meetings between these sides have gone under, and the home team has won and covered all 3 meetings. Dolphins $1.40 minus 7.5, total 50.5 for this game. Both these sides are really out of form. Dolphins have lost 3 straight. They're coming back from a trip from Perth last week when they lost to the Roosters. And then the Warriors coming off a kind of embarrassing loss to the Eels last week, and they've lost 3 of their past 4 with the only win against the West Tigers. If I had to pick a side in this game, I'd lean towards the Dolphins, just as I think overall they are the better side, but no confidence really betting into this game. And when both teams are like so out of form, it's kind of like a game where you can just easily choose to stay away from it. And kind of both games on Sunday are a little bit like this. Like they're just really ugly games on paper. Expect Dolphins to be winning, but probably not too keen on a side or total. Then final game of the round, Newcastle take on the West Tigers. Newcastle big favorites here, minus 10.5, which is not generally what you see for a side that's lost 3 straight games and has lost 6 of their past 8 as well. But the Tigers just definitely not performing really well at all. Newcastle have won and covered the past 5 versus West Tigers. So it's a game, realistically, they should be winning. They're on paper, we've got the worst 2 attacking sides here, and we've got a 51.5 point total. So if I had to pick a side in this game, I'd be leaning towards the unders. However, we have seen in previous times, all of a sudden, the Tigers I think they were 0-10 all the way to the under through the first 10 or 11 weeks of the season. Then now all of a sudden they're just consistently involved in really high scoring games. That reason is what makes me a touch nervous taking the under 51.5. So I'm not completely sure at this stage whether I'm going to go with it, but we do have a strong trend towards the under in this matchup. But another one of these games, similar Dolphins, Warriors, Knights, Tigers, where they're just really ugly games on paper, and there's a lot better betting opportunities this weekend. So I'm just going to quickly recap my thoughts on each of the games. Storm versus Rabbitohs. I think the Storm will win, but definitely looking at try scorers for that matchup. Titans versus Sharks. We could also look at the Storm team total, but it's going to be such a high number. Then we got Titans versus Sharks. Looking for a Sharks plus 4.5 or even plus 6.5. I'm just going to wait till closer to the game time. Eels versus Panthers. Penrith will win this game. Another one where we're going to look at try scorers in the upcoming video. Raiders versus Seagulls, like Manly, minus 3.5 in this game. Cowboys versus Broncos. I think Cowboys win and like the over in that matchup. Dragons, Bulldogs, like the Bulldogs, minus 3.5. Dolphins, Warriors, probably a stay away game, but I think Dolphins at home should be winning. And Knights versus Tigers, another ugly game. I think Knights win this game. I think they're a little bit too short at around that $1.30 mark. And so it's important to know that when we're going through and analyzing these games, we're using statistics to make these decisions. So using tools like the Bet Finder. So it's not just purely based on my opinion on how good or bad I think these sides are. We're using the data to give us that analysis of those sides, where they stack up against each other and where they rank in the league. So if we look at the Rabbitohs Storm game here we have all their attacking stats, and you can see this is their averages in this category, where that ranks overall in the league. and then same for the Rabbitohs, and then also looking at defense. So we can see we have a top 4 side predominantly here in defense going up against a bottom 3 side in a lot of categories there in defense. And it makes it a lot easier for you to go through and analyze the games. And this is just one of the tools of about 20 different things that I use to analyze the games. You want to use these to complete your analysis and make your research process on the NRL a hell of a lot easier. I'll put the link in the description for the bet finders. You can use them to complete your research process and make sure every bet you're putting on, you're giving yourself the best chance of winning that bet because of how you've selected it. I post these up for every single game. So from Tuesday every week, all the bet finders are up there for members, part of investor.bet. And so they can use them to make their betting decisions. You also get all the betting data, betting trends, everything for those sides. And then all the try scorer matchups. So looking at these for the try scorers, and then also the tries by position, everything that you need to analyze try scorer trends. And we also have the try scorer by game. We're going to be covering all of these in the upcoming video. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully this video helped give you some insight into the upcoming games this weekend. And if you enjoy watching videos like this, make sure you subscribe because I'm going to keep on posting them right up to the grand final. So talk to you guys soon. Thanks for watching.